Alrighty, so it is 16:35, so we'll get started here in just 1 second. So there's quite a few of you here, so we'll go over a little bit of administrivia before we get started. If everyone could make sure, please, that their push to talk is enabled, and try and keep the channel clear for the duration of the class. If you've got any questions, you can post them to the lecture.e-uni channel. As I notice them, I'll answer them, and we'll have I'll stop the questions as I finish each section of the class, and we'll have a generic Q&A at the end. If you wish to, I expect the lecture to go for about 75 minutes. There will be a short practical at the end. You can participate in the practical anywhere in E-UNI as long as you can find a cosmic signature in the system you're in. If you wish to participate in the practical, you should be sitting in an exploration frigate with a cloaking device of some sort and a probe launcher with probes fitted to the ship. The reason you should do that is once you're scanning, you want to make sure you're cloaked, because scanning tends to take up pretty much all of your screen unless you've got like a 40-inch monitor. And if you're sitting there paying attention to your scanning, if someone comes along and you're uncloaked and decides you look better in your pod, well, you should have been cloaked. The slides are, unfortunately, I don't quite have slides for all of the class. I'm about 90% done with it, but that'll get us through most of it. So let's get started. So my name's Rorhke Shardani. I've been with E-UNI for a little bit over a year now. I spend a lot of time exploring because I live in Wormhole space at the moment. So I've spent most of my career doing exploring of one kind of another. Started off looking for gas for money, and now living in wormholes. Well, if you don't explore, you don't have much in the line of content. So what is exploration? Exploration is using probes to locate and scan down cosmic signatures that can appear in space. These signatures can contain hackable containers with items inside, combat sites where you have a chance to obtain some faction loot, and wormholes. And in the wormholes you can find more stuff to scan down with combat sites and whatnot, but also gas clouds, rare ores, ice. So there are several reasons to do it. The potential profit, the excitement of never knowing what you're going to run into, or if you're curious to explore some of the over 5,000 systems in E-UNI, you're going to need to be able to scan your way down to find them all. So we're on slide 4 here. If you have a look at the picture on slide 4, if you look in space, you'll see these two things floating around out there. Sometimes it's a diamond with green sides around it. Other times it's the diamond with the red sides and the concentric circles around it. The green thing is called a cosmic anomaly. The red thing is called a cosmic signature. But that's just how they look in space. You can't actually do anything with them by interacting with them in space. To interact with them, you have to do something different. So when you're in space, you can open your probe scanner window by hitting Alt-P in Windows, or the Apple option P for Mac, and you'll get a little window like shown there on slide 5. The top 3 that you see in the probe scan window there are called cosmic signatures. You know that because they say cosmic signature. They also say 0% over the side. 0% indicates that you've made no effort to scan them down. You know they're in system, you don't know how to get to them. The two at the bottom with the green lines underneath them and the arrow on the far right are called cosmic anomalies. Now, the anomalies are always there. They're available to be warped to. You can click on the arrow in the probe scanner window, and it'll warp you into the anomaly, or you can right-click on them and go warp to. Cosmic signatures, until you've scanned them down to 100%, there's nothing you can do with them. And that's basically the meat of exploration right there. But let's talk about how we go about doing those things. If you're not a keyboard shortcut person and you prefer to click on things, on slide 6 we've got a couple of pictures there that show you how you can bring up the probe scanner window through clicking. So to the left of your capacitor, you've got the little icon there that looks like the radar scope. If you click on that, you'll get another submenu with 3 other icons. The one on the left with all the circles together will bring up your probe scanner window. So in the probe scanner window, if you are in a system where there's lots of things there and you want to narrow down what you're concentrating on, you can see there's 2 little boxes on the right-hand side in the middle of the screen for filtered and ignored. If you click on the filter drop-down, you can choose what you're going to try and look for. There are 5 by default: anomalies, structures, drones, signatures, and ships. Now, the anomalies just is a toggle on-off whether you see them or not. The other 4 have to be scanned down. So cosmic anomalies can basically be 2 things. They can be combat sites or ore sites. Now, ore sites can contain minerals or ice. A combat site is just what it sounds like. It's a site where NPC rats spawn in one or more waves and possibly in one or more rooms separated by acceleration gates. You walk to the site, you kill the rats, you scoop the loot. Depending upon the difficulty of the site, you can get various modules. For example, the Blood Raiders drop the Dark Blood modules. Drones will drop sentient modules. The ore sites are there for miners to exploit. Ice sites contain ice asteroids that require special ice mining modules to harvest. The other sites, you just need to warp in your favourite mining frigate with mining lasers and sit there and grab your ores. So normally the ore sites that you'll find spawning will spawn. If you're in high sec and you find an ore anomaly, what you're likely to find is the ores that you won't normally find in that section of space. So if you're in 0.8 to 1.0 space, you might find an ore anomaly that has jasper or kernite, the 0.6 and 7 ores or low sec ores. For ice mining, you want to be careful. Ice always spawns in the same system. If you have a look at, is everyone familiar with .land, evemaps.dotland.net? It contains a map of all of the systems in E-UNI. Some of the systems, if you're looking on the region map, when you're looking at the region maps in .land, some of the systems will have a light blue circle around them. What that circle means is that there is ice that will spawn in that system. The ice is always that system it spawns in. When it spawns, it stays until it's mined out. When it's mined out, it'll respawn somewhere else in that system 4 hours later. The problem with that is if you're in it's there, the gankers know it's there as well. So when you're mining ice, you want to make sure you've got proper preparations, be in a properly tanked ice ship and not be in something that's fragile, because the gankers will come in, they'll blow you up, and the other miners will be quite happy that you weren't properly prepared. But that's a topic that can be discussed in the mining class that's offered from time to time. If you want more information on cosmic anomalies and ice mining, there's a couple of links to the wiki there at the bottom of slide 9. Okay, so cosmic signatures have to be scanned down to 100% in order to be able to be warped to. The signatures come in 5 categories. Now, prior to the Odyssey expansion, which happened in June 2013, the names of the sites were weird sci-fi type names. In the Odyssey expansion, they were renamed into something in very plain English. So these are listed on slide 10. Gas sites were called LADAR. Data were called radar. Relics were magnetometric. Wormholes were called unknown sites, and combat sites were combat. Ore sites used to be called grabometric, but now they got moved from signatures to anomalies. You can always see them. The reason I mention that is if you're scanning the E-UNI wiki, most of the articles have been cleaned up now, but from time to time you'll still see references to the old names. So they're recorded there on slide 10 as reference. So if you see a reference to a magnetometric site, you know they're talking about what's now called a relic site. All right, next slide, slide 11. We'll cover all this in more details, but there's a couple of wiki articles here just that you can store away for reference later on scanning, cosmic signatures, and cosmic anomalies, but I hope to be able to cover a whole bunch of detail here as we proceed with the lecture. Okay, starting on slide 12, let's talk about skills. Like all things in EVE, there are skills that need to be trained. You can't do anything without skills. There are 3 facets to scanning that skill training can improve. First off is the scan strength. When you're scanning, your probes have a signal strength. The higher the strength, the easier it is to scan things. Your skills can also improve what's known as scan deviation. The scan deviation is basically where the probes think the target is versus where the target actually is in space. And the third one is the scan time. By default, when you start analyzing your probes, it's a 10-second cycle while the probes do their thing and return the results to you. There are skills you can train to lower that down. There are 4 skills, and only 4 skills, that affect your training, that affect your base scanning. Starting on slide 13, we've got Astrometrics. That's your base skill. All of these skills are intelligence and memory based. Astrometrics requires Science 3. It's a 3x skill. And every level in Astrometrics improves by 5% all 3 of those facets we talked about: the scan strength, the scan deviation, and the probe scan time. Then the 3 specialist skills will take one of those 3 facets and improve them further. So astrometric range finding only requires Science 3. It's an 8x skill. Each level of that will increase your scan strength by a further 5%. Now, if you're planning on taking up a career in scanning, it's recommended that you want astrometrics to a minimum of 4 and all of the sub-skills to a minimum of 3. Of course, you can always go better than that if you want. The second of the 3 sub-skills is Astrometric S Acquisition. It's also int mem. It requires Science 3 and Astrometrics 3. The benefit it gives is a reduction in your scanning probe time. Again, you probably want that as a minimum of 3. Now, most people will tell you that this skill it's the one that you need to worry about least, because there's nothing that this skill grants you that can't be overcome with a little bit of patience. Because you're talking dropping a 10-second scan to 7 or 8 seconds. So it's only a couple of seconds. However, if you're in a wormhole and you're trying to scan down a possible victim that you can see on your D-scanner, the faster you can get a lock on them, the better you're going to be, because if they're paying attention and they see combat probes in space, they're going to cloak up or boogie. And the final of the 3 sub-skills is Astrometrics Pinpointing. 5x skill, it requires Astrometrics to 4 and also the base of science to 3. 5x skill, and it'll improve your scan deviation by another 5% per level. So what does scan strength and scan deviation mean exactly? Well, we really don't know how scan strength factors into the equations, because it doesn't appear that CCP has released the calculations behind that. However, practical experience has shown the higher your scan strength, the easier it is to scan down the signatures. Deviation is a mathematical term. It can be defined as the difference between where the object actually is versus where the object is observed to be. So to put it in game terms, it's where the signature really is versus where the probes think it is. If you are a math geek, which I am not, in the scanning link there on slide 15, there's an equation there that talks about how to calculate maximum deviation. So the basics is the higher your scan strength, the lower your deviation, the easier it is to scan down signatures. Now, there are a couple of other ways to improve your scanning as well. Since we should be doing exploration in an exploration frigate, and each race has one, the 4 racial frigates each have a bonus to scan strength tied to the ship. So for racial frigate, each level in your racial frigate skill, when you're in that race as exploration frigate, will give you a 7.5% bonus per level to your scan probe strength, to a cap of 37.5% at level 5. Should you wish to increase your scanning into a Covert Ops Frigate, which is the Tech 2 version, your racial frigate skill goes away and it's replaced by something else. Your scan strength is then tied to the Covert Ops skill, and each level of the Covert Ops skill grants a 10% bonus to your scan's probe strength. So once you get to a stage where you're in a Covert Ops Frigate and you have Covert Ops to 5, your ship is giving you a 40% scan bonus, up to 50 if you want to take the time to train Covert Ops to 5. Whereas the max the racial frigate is going to give you is 37.5. A couple of other subsidiary skills are on slide 17 for those following along at home, are hacking and archaeology. When you find data and relic sites, in order to hack those sites, you need to use data and relic analyzers. Hacking is the skill that will unlock the data analyzer, and archaeology for the relic analyzers. These skills make it easier for you to hack the cans. You need to get, in order to use the Tech 2 versions of the analyzers, you need to get those skills to 5. It's a fairly long train. It's about 10-12 days if you're mapped into the appropriate skills. As you attempt to scan down a signature, that strength we saw on the probe scanner earlier of 0 will increase as you get closer to getting a lock on the signature. At 25%, the description will change from cosmic signature to the type of site you're trying to scan down. It'll say gas site, relic site, whatever. Once you get to 75, and the line under it, anything less than 25, there's a line under it that's red. From 25% to 75%, that line changes to an orange-yellow color, and it just says whether it's a gas site, what have you. At 75%, the line turns green. It'll give you the exact name of the site you're trying to scan. So it might go from cosmic signature to a gas site to instrumental reservoir. Once you get 100%, you're able to warp to the site. So you've got the skills, now you need the ships. So as I mentioned before, each race has an exploration frigate with bonuses in racial frigate, as well as a set role bonus. Otherwise, the only difference between the exploration frigates is the slot layout. The bonuses are the same for each race's ship. So the example I've got here at the bottom of slide 18 is from the Minmatar exploration frigate. You can see that Minmatar frigate gives you a 7.5% to scanner probe strength per level, plus a 5% reduction in salvage iteration, which as far as exploration is concerned, we really don't care about. And then there is a flat roll bonus of plus 5 to your relic and data analyzer virus strength. And we'll get to virus strengths and coherence when we get to that section towards the end of the lecture. Slide 19 shows the 4 ships. The Yamar has the Magnate, the Galente, the Imicus, the Caldari Heron, and the Minmatar probe. Okay, the Tech 2 versions of these ships are called Covert Ops Frigates. The requirements for these ships are racial frigate to 5, a minimum of Covert Ops to 1, recommended to 4 for reasons which we'll get to in a minute, electronics upgrade to 5, and then CPU management and power grid management at 2 and spaceship command to 3. The reason you want Covert Ops to 4 is that at Covert Ops 4, which also requires CPU management 4, you can fit a Covert Ops cloaking device. The benefit of a Covert Ops cloaking device over the prototype or improved is that you can warp while cloaked. So if you're flying a ship that's able to fit a Covert Ops cloaking device, why wouldn't you have the skills to take full advantage of all the functions of the ship? The traits on the Covert Ops frigates vary slightly. The bonuses at Racial Frigate 5 have been changed from scan probe strength to weapon systems bonuses that are fairly common for that race. The bonuses for the Covert Ops skills are the same across all 4. A reduction in cloaking device CPU requirement for ease of fit. The Covert Ops cloak has a very hefty CPU requirement, so with the fitting array assigned to each frigate, without the reduction you could never fit a Covert Ops cloak to a frigate. It has that bonus we talked about to probe scan strength and a reduction in the probe flight time. Again, that's a time thing. When you move your probes about the system and hit analyze on your probe scanner window, the probes have to warp from where they are now to where you want them to be. So in a Covert Ops frigate, it's just another one of those facets that lets you scan things down a little bit faster. Okay, so the 4 Tech 2 ships, like other Tech 2 ships, they look like their Tech 1 equivalent, apart from a bit of a paint job and finish. The Yamar has the Anathema, the Galente Helios, the Caldari Buzzard, and the Minmatar Cheetah. If you can fly strategic cruisers, also known as Tech 3 cruisers, it's also possible to fit subsystems to those ships in order to effectively give us Tech 3 cruiser the same bonuses as a Covert Ops frigate. You do see people running around with those fits. I don't know that I'd want to sit around a site hacking it in a strategic cruiser, but that would be up to you. The Sisters of Eve faction also have their faction ships that are bonus scanning ships as well. The blueprint copies for these ships can be purchased from the Sisters of Eve loyalty point stores, either with loyalty points or if you're lucky in a drone combat site, you might find Rogue Nexus chips that you can turn in at a loyalty point store for a BPC for one of these 3 hulls. The Astero is the frigate, which requires the 46X chip. The Stratios is the cruiser, which requires the 43X chip. And the Nestor is the battleship, which requires the 42X chip. If you're fighting in a drone combat site, if you see usually one of the boss ship, if you will, of the combat site will be called a sentient something. The sentient ship has the chance of dropping either faction loot or a chip. If you get the chip, you can turn it in for a BPC and build it. The requirements to build these ships is just minerals. So if you manage to get yourself a 46X chip, get a BPC, and you can find the local Sisters of Eve loyalty point store in the Agent Finder. Just go to Agent Finder, look for level 1 agents for the Sisters of Eve faction. It'll show you where the closest system is. And the minerals to require it to build an Astero are no much more than the minerals to build any other frigate. Okay, so these ships are hull bonused for scan probe strength as opposed to a per level amount. Let's look at the picture here on slide 24 at the bottom. This is a snapshot of the roll bonus from the Astero. So the Astero has a fixed roll bonus just from sitting in the hull of 37.5% to scanning strength, which is the equivalent of any of the other Tech 1 exploration frigates with Racial Frigate 5. So until you get to Covert Ops 4 and into a Covert Ops frigate, the Astero will give you, I say better scan results here on the slide, but it's the same as having a Racial Frigate to 5. The price of the Astero has dropped since I put this slide deck together. 3-4 months ago, it was around 75 million. I believe they're down to 55 million now. The other thing that an Astero gives you that a Tech 1 frigate won't is that it can fit a Covert Ops cloak. So it gives you that option of warping around cloaked. If you're new to the game, just be very careful. They're expensive ships, and you'll often, if you happen to peruse through Z Killboard, you'll often see relatively new players losing Asteros all the time because they can get into them easily, and they're not careful enough and don't know how to behave in wormhole space. And people who live in wormholes love day trippers because they're easy to blow up. Okay, slide 25 has pictures of our 3 Sisters of Eve ships for no other reason than they're pretty, and I wanted to show them off.
There's also one thing about the Nestor. It's the only battleship that can fit into a C1.
Yeah, Nestors. I've never bought myself a Nestor because they're horrifically expensive.
And they're somewhat not fittable very well, but they do fit through a C1 wormhole.
Well, there you go. Didn't know that. Okay, so before we move on to fittings, any questions on the ships that you can use for exploration? Now, having said what you should use, you can fit a probe launcher to any ship that has the fitting capacity for it. So without the skills, you want the hull bonuses or the roll bonuses in order to get your scan strength up to where you can find stuff. But there's nothing stopping you from putting a probe launcher on any ship with a spare high slot. Alrighty, we're on slide 26, moving on to fits. So you've got ships, you've got skills. Yeah, you could scan in a rattlesnake, why not? How do you fit them? How do you fit your ships? There's an article that I linked here on slide 26 to Top Tier Tactics, which was an online exploration guide on how to fit your ship. Everyone has their own opinions on how you fit an exploration ship, but this is a nice long article with some good comments in it, so I wanted to include it there as a reference. Okay, high slots. So, in your high slots, if you're exploring, always fit a cloaking device. Always, always, always. If you can't fit a Covert Ops cloak, fit an improved or a prototype. A ship sitting in space scanning while uncloaked is just asking to turn into space dust. If I was to see a scanning ship somewhere uncloaked in low sec or lower space, I would certainly blow it up, and I've done so. Second, probe launcher, and probes in multiples of 8. I tend to carry 16 just because when I've launched 8, like any other high slot that contains charges, it will automatically start a reload cycle. So I don't have to worry about when I get to my next system in reloading. I'll tend to jump into a wormhole if my D-scan's clear, launch my probes, I wait the 10 seconds for a reload while I'm micro-warping away, and then cloak up. If I see something on grid, I'd warp to a Celestial before I did the reload cycle.
How many probe launchers can I use? I can
one.
Use two? Okay.
Just one.
Can I use the 16 probes?
Well, what I'm saying is, you can only launch 8 at a time. But if you have 16, instead of having to launch your probes, pull them back down, there's no reason you can't run with 8. It's a personal preference thing that I do. Because otherwise you launch your probes, when you finish scanning, you've got to suck them back in, you've got to reload them and launch them. I just do an automatic reload. I just carry 16 because I just have it automatically reload. It's a personal preference thing. Probes are dirt cheap. Okay, so beyond your cloaking device and your probe launcher, if you have any spare utility high slots fit to taste, you may want to fit. There was a video on YouTube I saw once of a guy running around in a Covert Ops I believe he was in an anathema. He had his probe launcher, his cloaking device, and a salvager, and he wandered around low sec, scanning down drones that people who'd been blown up left in space, and if there were any wrecks there, he'd salvage the wrecks while he was at it. Okay, so we're on slide 28 now, talking about the probe launchers. So there are 2 types of probe launchers. You have a core probe launcher, which will only launch core scanner probes. The core scanner probes can scan from a minimum of 1/4 of an AU out to a max of 32 AU. The only thing you can scan with a core probe launcher is cosmic signatures. The other type of probe launcher is an expanded probe launcher. It will launch both core probes and combat scanner probes. The core probes behave exactly the same as when launched from a core probe launcher, if you launch them from an expanded. However, the combat probes, they will only scan down to half an AU, but will go out to 64 AU. They can scan signatures, structures, ships, and drones. So if you're in space and you see on D-scan a ship that you might want to try and track down and kill, you could launch combat scanner probes, try and scan down the ship, and see if you can get the jump on him and kill him. So each type of launcher comes in 3 flavors. You have a vanilla Tech 1 launcher, for example, Core Probe Launcher 1. It has no bonus. It's just something that lets you launch your probes. The Tech 2 launcher, which requires Astrometrics to 5, gives you a 5% bonus to your scan probe strength. The third is the faction version of the scanner. So the Sisters of Eve faction launchers, being Sisters Core Probe Launcher, will give you a 10% bonus to scan probe strength. The Sisters launchers are quite expensive. The Core Probe Launcher runs about 30 million, and the Combat Launcher runs about... No, the Core's about 35, the Combat's about 30. Then just to confuse things... Right, and as Biwako mentions, the expanded launcher can store up to 80 core launchers. But if you want to just plug 16 in there, you've always got them ready. So each of the types of probes come in two varieties. You have your standard probes and you have your faction probes. Your faction when you're talking about your scan probe strength, all of that starts before any other multipliers are applied. It all starts from the base scan strength of the probe. So core scanner probes have a base scan strength of 40. The Sisters version have 10% more than that at 44. And then for the combat probes, the vanilla probes have a strength of 20. The Sisters start at 22. Once you've got that base scan strength from whatever probe you're using, you then start multiplying in your other multipliers. Your 10% for a faction launcher, your 37.5% from your bonus, plus your Astrometrics and all your other skills. And that comes out to a strength right at the end. Now, as Kanjar mentions, the capacity mattered more back in the days. These days, it's the only way you can really lose your probes is if you're in system with your probes launched and you get disconnected. When you come back in, you'll have to manually reconnect to your probes. Otherwise, jumping through systems, if you jump through a jump gate and forget your probes are automatically dropped back into your hangar, back into your hold before you leave system. Okay, we're on slide 31 now. We're talking mid slots. Mids and lows are pretty much fit to taste. However, for mids, propulsion mod is usually something you want. So you can burn away from a gate because once you've jumped into a system, you want to burn away from the gate or the wormhole. A cycle or two of an MWD will help you with that. If you're hacking a site, you can move between the cans that are sometimes 50, 60, 70 kilometers apart. Beware, though, that when you're doing that, if you're using a micro warp drive, you get a signature radius bloom while the micro warp drive's active, which means that if a ship comes in and tries to get a lock on you, 500% bonus to your signature radius, it means they're going to be able to get a quick lock on you. If a bomber comes in and drops a bomb on you, that damage is multiplied by your signature radius as well. If you plan, so other mid slots, if you plan on running relic and or data sites, then the appropriate analyzer is required in your mid slots. If you're going to run both data and relic, well, that's two of your mids gone. Now, in a recent patch, they introduced a combined analyzer. I haven't been lucky. I haven't found a blueprint for one yet. My understanding is the way they're running is they will give you the functions of both of the analyzers in one module with a slightly less strength on them.
And they're crazy expensive.
I'll bet they are. I haven't seen. I believe they dropped from exploration. I haven't seen one in all the sites I've hacked in the last several months. Other things you can stick in your mids, there are modules that will further boost your scan strength, deviation, or your probes or your scanning time, and they are called the scan acquisition array, the scan pinpointing array, the scan range finding array. If you want to give a little boost to your stats in those areas, you could fit those modules. It's also possible that you could put a cargo scanner in your mids. When you appear at a data or relic site and there are cans there, you can scan the can to see what's in them. Now, what some people do is they'll scan a can, they'll see that it's empty, they won't hack it. Why should I hack it? There's nothing in there for it. What they're not realizing when they do that is if they don't complete the site won't despawn. So it would be good practice if you're scanning a site. I don't run with a cargo scanner just because I don't want to be tempted. So if you start a site, as long as you don't get chased out of it by a hostile, it's like the old VHS days, be kind, rewind. Well, we're going to be kind, complete our sites, because when you complete the site, it will despawn and it will respawn elsewhere. If you've left a site sitting there with one unhacked can with nothing in it, that's a site that hasn't respawned elsewhere in New Eden for some other explorer to get his mitts on. Okay, the lows. Lows are very much up to how you want to fly your ship. Not necessarily any particular recommendation. You're paranoid about being scrammed or pointed, well, you could maybe add warp core stabilizers. You want to be able to get out as fast as possible, maybe inertia stabilizers. Want some tank? Well, maybe plates or damage control. If you're flying in a stero and you want your drones to bring the pain, well, maybe you want to add a drone damage amplifier down there. It all depends upon how you like to fly. I had a conversation with someone last week. We're comparing various fits. They've got their little frigate tanked up to blazes. And I applied no tank to mine. I'm figuring that if I'm exploring and I'm caught, I haven't paid enough attention to descan on my overview, and I deserve to get blown up. And quite frankly, if something jumps on you and you're in an exploration frigate and you get tackled, having tanks just going to delay the inevitable, because it's highly unlikely you're going to get away. Okay, finally we have rigs. There is a rig called a small gravity capacitor upgrade that will give you another 10% scan strength bonus or 15% for the Tech 2 version. The Tech 1 versions of the gravity capacitor upgrade take 200 units of calibration. If you're flying the Sisters of Eva Stero, it only has 350 calibration points, so you can only fit one. The racial frigates have 400, so you can fit two. So for a ship that you plan on using to hack data or relic sites, there are also rigs you can use that increase your virus coherence. The small mimetic algorithm bank adds 10 to your virus coherence for data sites, and the small emission scope sharpener adds 10 to your virus coherence for relic sites. We'll get to the difference between strength and coherence a little bit later when we get to hacking of sites. So now we have skills, a ship, and a fit. We need to learn how to scan. However, showing you how to scan is best handled through the practical, so we'll defer that until the end. Before we move on, are there any questions on fits, anything we've covered so far?
Yes. I have a quick question about warp core stabilizers.
Yep.
I see a lot of people using 2 nanofiber structures in the low slots of, say, the Heron. What if you replace those with 2 warp core stabilizers? Would that improve your chances of getting away if you did happen to get caught at a site or anywhere in maybe a warp bubble or a gate camp?
Okay, so the nanofibers. So you've got two different things, two different aspects. The nanofibers help with your agility. Every ship has an amount of time that it takes for them from a standing start to align to where they're going, reach 75% speed, and get out. That's the align time. And if you're in a tool like Python or EFT, one of the stats there it'll show you is the align time on the ship. And if you hover over it, like in EFT, it might say 5.1 seconds to align, 6 seconds to warp out. What the warp core stabilizers do, each warp core stabilizer you adds a point of warp core stability to your ship. What that does is it will nullify anybody attempting to use a warp disruptor or a warp scrambler on you. Okay, so a warp disruptor, or what's sometimes called a long point, will apply 1 point of warp destability to your ship. A warp scrambler will apply 2, and there are faction variants that will apply 3. If the enemy trying to tackle you has more points of destability than you have of stability, they're going to shut down your warp drive. Okay, so it's the difference between getting out. The nanofibers will help you get out faster. The warp core stabilizers will stop you from getting your warp engine shut down. Does that make sense?
It does. So I guess it's a personal choice of what you.
It's a personal choice. Do you want to try and get out fast before they can get a lock on you? Because if you're sitting in a wormhole running a site or scanning, you should be refreshing your descan every 3 seconds.
Sure.
If you see something on descan, get out. Now that's not going to stop a cloaky ship. So, for example, somebody might be in a Stratios and they decloak on top of you. You should also be watching your overview. The minute you see them decloak, you should be getting out, because there is a delay between decloaking a ship and when you can start using your systems, and it's like 4 or 5 seconds. So, there's offsets on which way you want to do it.
Okay, thank you.
And right, as Tolman mentioned, the downside of warp core stabilizers is slower to lock things, a shorter locking range. So if I'm running a site, I'm locking up all my cans at my maximum 50k range, so that as soon as I get on a can, I can get to it. With 2 or 3 warp core stabilizers, your targeting range is down to like 3k. You've got to be right on top of the thing before you lock it. So it's personal preference.
True. Okay. Thank you.
Alrighty, so let's move on now to slide 36. We'll talk implants. Like most things in EVE, if you've got a stat you want to improve, there's an implant for that. There's a couple of types of implants. You've got now in your slots 1 to 5 in your head are your attribute implants, but some of them have set bonuses. So the virtue set, there's a low-grade set which are +2 to stats, and a mid-grade set which are +3 for slots 1 to 5. If you have the set, will give you bonus to scanning. There's also in slots 6 to 8, you can have pinpointing, acquisition, and range finding implants in strengths of 2, 6, and 10% that can go in slots 6 to 8. I've just given you an example of a couple of them here at the bottom of slide 36. There's a link to the wiki article that goes into exacting details on all of them. All right, the last thing to consider here is it's not just your scan strength that you need to worry about. Every signature has a signature strength. It's a match then between your strength of your probes versus the strength of the site you're trying to scan down to try and get a lock. It is possible that if you don't have a good enough skills, or you're not flying a ship that has bonuses, that you, no matter how hard you try, you just won't be able to get a lock on a site because its signature strength is so small and your scan strength is not hard enough, tall enough. The kind of things you'll have trouble scanning down if your skills aren't quite up to scratch. Sleeper sites, and then maybe the highest, the most richest of gas sites, or the C6 wormhole entrances. So if you can't lock something down, just go back and get some more skills, or come back and have another crack at it when you've added in a scanning module or upgraded to Sisters probes. What you'll see a lot of people do is they'll use a regular launcher, which is cheap, and Sisters probes, which are cheap enough. They're like 300,000-400,000 each, so 8 of them's 3-4 million. All right, starting on slide 38, I've got a couple of sample fits. This fit here was somebody who jumped me once upon a time when I was hacking a site and blew me up. So this Astero is fit for combat. It's heavily tanked as far as frigates go. It's got tackle on it. So, and because, it's a cloaky frigate, it can come in, jump on top of you, decloak, get a lock on you, send the drones out to do the work, boom, dead. So I don't know whether it's a good fit or not. I've seen many different hunter-killer type Astero fits, but killed me once when I was in a little T1 frigate, so... Okay, the second one here on slide 39 is a fit I use on a pure scanning alt. It's got Sisters launcher and probes to maximize scan bonus, a couple of arrays to match those bonuses. Before I had this alt trained into Archaeology, I'd basically go out with him, do all my scanning, bring the bookmarks back, and then send my main out to hack the sites. And then finally on slide 40 is the fit I use on Rorhke's Anathema. Well, it's changed a little bit since I don't carry the cargo scanner anymore, but I have an expanded probe launcher, and I've got both types of probes in my hold, 2 gravity capacitor upgrades to maximize the scan bonus, both analyzers, micro warp drive. So play around, find the ship of your choice. Now, personally, I don't like the buzzard. I was playing around. My alt got jumped in a buzzard the other day. As soon as I saw something on D-scan, I started warping out. I don't know whether it was my fit or the fact that it's a slowish ship to begin with. It turned like a pregnant whale and took forever to get out and got tackled and blown up. So play with the ships, play with the fits, see what you get. So let's go back to anomalies for a minute. Most of the anomalies, you just warp in and deal with them. You right-click on the anomaly in your probe scanner window, warp in, do with whatever's there. Now, combat sites have rats to kill. The difficulty of the rat, depending upon the security status of the system you're in. Sometimes when you complete a combat anomaly, you get a little pop-up window. So you might be fighting some drones, and a little pop-up window appears with the name of the escalation you're about to get, and say, oh, you notice some of the drones fly away, you got coordinates of where they went, chase them down and deal with them. When you complete, if you get one of those, you can open your journal, which is Alt-J. There's an expedition tab, and you'll see a thing there that says a certain system name, somewhere from 6 to 10 jumps away. You travel to that system, right-click, warp to, and it's basically another combat site, and they'll escalate 3 to 5 times. Sometimes the escalations will give you a better chance at decent loot. Sometimes you get nothing. I ran an escalation from a drone site one night and got 3 Astero chips from the 5 systems I visited. That was definitely the exception. I've done many a time where I've got nothing. For ore sites, take your favourite mining ship, be it a barge, an exhumer, a venture, whatever. Lock up the ores, mine them away. Be aware that in anything 0.7 or less, you're going to have rats, so make sure you've got some way of dealing with them, which is usually done by drones. For ice fields, as I mentioned, since everybody knows where the ice fields are, be prepared to deal with any gankers or war targets that come along. A procurer or its Tech 2 equivalent, a skiff, is the best for those because they're very heavily tanked. Anyone who appears in an ice field in something other than that, the miners love it, because if gankers turn up, they're going to choose the ship that can be blown up easily, as opposed to the procurer or the skiff, which can generally, unless a fleet of, a suicide gank fleet comes in, you can generally withstand the tank long enough for Concorde to turn up. Well, in high sec anyway. Okay, so let's talk cosmic signatures. The first one we're going to talk about is gas sites. Gas comes in 3 different types. In null and low sec, you can find mycocerocin and cytocerocin. They are used in the manufacture of booster drugs. Now, there never used to be much money in that. Since booster drugs are legal now, as of a patch or two ago, I don't know if it's worth mining them or not. That's something, if you're into manufacturing of drugs, you can see for yourself if they're worth anything. In wormhole space, however, you can find fullerenes. Fullerenes are used in the construction of Tech 3 ships, easily huffed with a Venture. So a Venture or its Tech 2 upgrade the Prospect are best for huffing gas. They're bonus for it. In order to huff gas, you need the gas cloud harvesting skill trained. That skill book costs 24 million ISK. You want it trained to at least 2, so you can fit 2 huffers. Or if you're going to be using the Tech 2 equivalent, you'll want gas cloud harvesting to 5. It's a 1x skill. It's super short to train. And once you start getting addicted on gas huffing, you'll definitely want the Tech 2 and the Prospect. I got addicted to gas huffing very early in my EVE career. One of the guys in the AMC, which is the Amar mining campus, if any of you are non-uni, found on his birthday last year something like 7 or 8 really rich sites. And over the course of 2 hours, we made hundreds of millions. So I've spent a lot. That got me started in exploring, looking for gas to find. Okay, so when gas in wormholes. When you find a gas site in a wormhole, there's a couple of things you need to watch out for. The minute when you initiate your warp to the site, a pop-up window will pop up telling you the name of the site and some flavor text. The minute that pops up, it starts a timer. It's invisible, and unless you're keeping track of it, there's no warning about it. At the 15-minute mark from when you initiated your warp to any time up to 22, 25 minutes later, sleepers are going to arrive, which are red, they're NPC sleeper drones, are going to warp in. They'll appear on grid. You've got about 5 seconds to get out. Otherwise, they'll lock you up and blow you up. That happens on all gas sites except for the site known as the Ordinary Perimeter Reservoir. This site does not have sleepers that warp in after 15 to 25 minutes. When you warp in, there are 5 sentry gun towers. If you warp into an ordinary site in a Venture, you are guaranteed to blow up before you can warp out. Because by the time it takes you to stop, by the time you've stopped warp, they've already got a lock on you. By the time you've aligned out, they've hit you. You can, if you want, bring back a well-tanked ship, like a battle cruiser, Tech 1 battle cruiser with a T2 tank, warp to the Ordinary, blow up the guns, then you can bring back your huffing ships and huff away to your heart's content. However, as always, when you're anywhere in New Eden, and particularly in wormholes, you need to be watching out for other players. Because other players would love to sit cloaked on a site, wait about 12, 13 minutes till your holds are full, blow you up, and maybe the loot ferry will be kind and have dropped your gas that they can scoop up. Right, Veltz mentions here in the lecture channel that in order to see the gas clouds on your overview, there is a harvestable cloud. If you're in E-UNI and running the E-UNI overview, they fixed that in the last update, so it's automatically selected. Otherwise, you're going to have to make sure you turn that option on yourself. The other thing to note about gas fields is do not warp to one unless you're ready to deal with what's there. So be prepared to huff for everything other than an ordinary or be in a combat ship in an ordinary. You should also be aware that sometimes someone else will have been there before you and already activated the site. The sleepers that are spawned there, if you warp in and you see sleepers already, just turn around and warp out. The sleepers will last until downtime. So if you've got a wormhole that survives the other side of downtime, if you warp to a site that you really want to huff and you see sleepers there, come back after downtime. The sleepers will be gone as long as no one else has reactivated the site. For more information on gas cloud mining, there's a link to the article on the wiki on slide 45. All right, next up, let's talk about ghost sites. A ghost site is a special kind of cosmic signature. It needs to be scanned down. It appears as a data site. When arriving on the site, and you can warp into the site cloaked. The timer doesn't start. The minute you uncloak, an invisible, silent timer starts. The timer lasts anywhere from 1 to 2 minutes. What you'll see in the site are 4 cans that need to be hacked with a data analyzer. If you fail a hack, the can explodes, dealing thousands of points of damage, usually more than enough to blow up a frigate. At the end of the timer, several rats will appear with you on grid. The rats are invulnerable. They will scram and web you, and will also take the remaining cans and make them explode for the aforementioned metric ton of damage. So the trick is to warp in, hack a can or two, get the loot, get out. A ghost site will be named with a size, a faction, covert research facility. So something like Lesser Gurista's Covert Research Facility. For more information on ghost sites, have a look at the article here linked on slide 47. Okay, let's talk wormholes. Wormholes is an entire class in and of itself. But I'll try and cover some basics here for you. So, first off, the term wormhole. The term wormhole is used interchangeably. It can mean the actual anomaly in space or the signature in space, which is the gateway from one system to another system. People who live in wormhole space also call their system that they live in a wormhole. If you ever played any role-playing games in the past, like for example in Dungeons and Dragons, they use the term level to indicate the power of a spell, the power of a character, how deep you are in a dungeon, how powerful a monster is. So it's an interchangeable term. So a wormhole is a temporary anomaly in space that will take you to unknown, unmapped, or possibly known parts of space. Wormhole systems are designated in 6 classes from Class 1, or people call it C1, the least dangerous, up through C6, the most dangerous. If you find a wormhole in space, you want to make sure once you've scanned it down, why go to the hassle of scanning it down again? Create a bookmark for it. When you go to bookmark, so if you've scanned down a wormhole, you warp to that wormhole and you want to bookmark it. You should always bookmark the entry to the wormhole from the overview. So if you look at the pictures here on slide 49, on the left, I've got a picture of my overview. I right-clicked it and I'd save location from there. What that does is it creates a bookmark on the wormhole at 0. If you bookmark the entry to your wormhole from the probe scanner window, it will still take you to the wormhole, but you're going to be 5 to 10 kilometers off it. Doesn't sound like a whole bunch, but if you're trying to get out of a wormhole in a hurry with a fleet of hostiles chasing you and you've bookmarked your wormhole at 5 to 10k off the hole, good chance you're going to get blown up before you can slow boat that last 5 to 10k. So make sure you create your bookmarks at 0, and when you're warping to it, you can warp right on top of it. The other thing you might want to consider is if you're traveling through wormholes is also create yourself a tactical 200 kilometers off the hole. As we discovered last night in a AMC gas huffing fleet, they were huffing a site, they had visitors, they warped exit to the hole, and there was a saber waiting for them on the hole, which dropped an interdiction bubble and got a couple of them blown up. If they had have burnt to a tactical 200 kilometers off the hole, they could have seen that there was a hostile waiting and warped off somewhere else. So not a requirement, but if you're day tripping into a wormhole to try and get ore or gas or something or run combat sites, you might want to consider having a tactical for your exit. Okay, so the wormhole itself, the actual anomaly in space that you jump through to get from System A to System B, has, my cat's here, has several attributes to it. It has both a lifetime in hours from when it spawns to where it dies of old age, as well as a mass limit on it that limits the actual maximum size of ship that can jump through in any one jump, and the total mass that can go through it total in all jumps before it collapses just from being worn out. So before you jump through a wormhole, you should do a show info on the wormhole, and a box will appear that gives you several key pieces of information. The first part tells you where your wormhole's going to. It'll say, this wormhole appears to lead to. If it says it leads to high, low, or null security space, then that wormhole is definitely taking you to high, low, or null sec. The other 3 options it can give you, it can say it leads to unknown parts of space, dangerous unknown parts of space, or deadly unknown parts of space. Unknown says that it's going to wormhole space. Just unknown by itself leads to a 1, a 2, or a 3. Dangerous is leading into a 4 or a 5. And deadly is leading into a 6. The next 3 lines will tell you about the life of the wormhole and the size of the ships that can go through it. So here on slide 57, we've got the 4 different messages that can appear on the first line at the bottom of the box. If this wormhole has not yet begun its natural cycle of decay and should remain at least another day, that means there's more than 24 hours left in that wormhole before it collapses. If it says this wormhole is beginning to decay and probably won't last another day, you have between 4 and 24 hours. Now, unless you watched its status change, you have no idea how many hours that is. It could be 5, it could be 20. You just know you have between 4 and 24. If it says the wormhole is reaching the end of its natural lifetime, you have from a few minutes to 4 hours. And if it says this wormhole is on the verge of dissipating into the ether, you have a couple of minutes. Once that timer runs out, the wormhole will collapse. If you don't get into the habit of doing a show info, it's not uncommon to have wormholes collapse behind you. In my early days, I often went exploring. A couple of times I forgot to check the status. The wormhole collapsed behind me. I had to scan out a new exit. You know, sometimes you'd scan through 4 or 5 wormholes before you find a new exit to high sec. And then it was 40 jumps home. You only have to do it a couple of times to not forget. Okay, line 2 talks about the mass of the wormhole. There are 3 messages you can get. This wormhole has not yet had its stability significantly disrupted. That means that you have more than 50% of the maximum mass allowance left. If it mentions that it's had its stability reduced but not yet critical, you're between 10 and 50. And if it says the wormhole has had its stability critically disrupted, you've got 10% or less. So each wormhole has a maximum mass allowance and a maximum mass per transit. So, for example, if you're in a wormhole space, you're in a C2 wormhole and you find a high-sec connection, that's always a type of wormhole will allow 1 billion kilograms through with a maximum hop per jump of 300. Sorry, 2 billion total, 300 per jump. So that means the largest ship you can jump through has a mass of 300 million kilograms, and each time you make a jump, it'll subtract it from that initial 2 billion. It is very common for people who live in wormholes, if they don't like their wormhole connections, they will forcibly collapse the wormhole. So you'll run through the biggest ship you can back and forth a few times just to make the wormhole collapse. And it's called rolling a wormhole. We're on slide 54. The last line here talks about the size of the ship that can pass through. Very small, small, medium, large, very large. Also, when you look at a wormhole in your overview, what you'll see is something that says wormhole dash and a 4-character code. The 4-character code will be a letter and 3 numbers. And that tells you information about the wormhole. One side of the wormhole will always be K162. K162 means it's the exit side of the wormhole. The wormhole spawned on the other end. Somebody jumped through and pushed the exit out here, and what you're looking at is the exit. There's no other information you can get out of that other than the fact, what we talked about in the show info panel, how much life's left in it, what size is it, and what general sector of space it's going to. However, for any other combination, there is a table. There's several of them out on the internet. There's one on the wiki there, linked at the bottom of slide 55, that you might find a B274. Well, B274, if you look in that table, is going to show you that it's always going to go to high sec. It has a maximum size per jump of 300 million kilograms, 2 billion kilograms total. But what that code on the table, it'll tell you where it leads, the total mass that can go before it collapses, the maximum mass in one jump, any mass regeneration on the hull, if any, the maximum stable lifetime of the wormhole in hours, and as with all this in university classes, there is no 6. Tolbert asks, can the stability regenerate? There are very few types of wormholes where there is a small amount of mass regeneration per day. I don't know why they bother, since none of them last much more than 24 to 36 hours anyway, so that regeneration will really only kick in once. So if you decide to go jumping into a wormhole, you always want to make sure that you've checked the show info before you jump in, to check the remaining life and the information. Once you've jumped into a wormhole, the very first thing you should do is do a quick D-scan to check for any other ships in there, and also your overview. Sometimes you'll jump into a wormhole and you'll be right in the middle of a bubble. because either someone's sitting on the hole with an interdictor or they've set a anchorable device there. Best thing I can suggest is to just try and burn back to the hole, hit your cloak, and hope for the best. The other thing to note about wormholes, you cannot see who's in system when in local. In K-space or known space, which is high, low, and null, you always know who's in system with you because they always appear in local. Wormhole space, that doesn't happen. The only way you'll appear in local is if you say something in local. If you say something in local, your name stays in local to everybody who was in the wormhole when you spoke until you leave system. So on the whole, chatting in local is not advised. Okay, the other thing to recognize, in known space, when you have a jump gate, you can jump back and forth between jump gates as often as you want. Not so in wormholes. When you jump through a wormhole in one direction, it starts at what's called a polarization timer. So you can only jump the same way through a wormhole once every 5 minutes. If you jump into one and then jump back, you can't go back again until your 5-minute timer has expired. The polarization timer, if you have one, appears on the wormhole entrance as an orange circle, shown in the picture on the bottom of slide 57. It also shows the time remaining before that wormhole will collapse. Before the polarization time is up. Okay, some wormholes have what is known as a static connection. If you are in a wormhole system that has a static to high-sec, you will always have a high-sec exit. Now, it doesn't mean it'll be to the same place or be in the same location in the system. It'll change every day as the wormhole collapses and respawns. But the minute that your static despawns, a new wormhole of the same type will spawn somewhere in the system. So C2 wormholes usually have 2 statics, and some C4s do as well. So, for example, the system that the wormhole campus lives in has a static C3 and a static high-sec. So we always have an exit to high-sec. We always have a connection to a random C3 wormhole. Okay, wormholes can also have special effects in them. Some will weaken your shields or armor or make you go faster or affect your targeting range or make your remote reps higher. There are 6 of them in total. Pulsar, Black Hole, Cataclysmic Variable, Magnetar, Red Giant, and Wolf Riot. There is a full list given at the bottom of slide 59, showing you the types of system and the various effects, and the effects get stronger the wormhole. So they're fairly weak in a C1, fairly strong in a C6. So, for example, you could take a Confessor, which is the Amar Tech 3 destroyer, into a C6 Wolf Riot and run some of the sites there, because the bonus that the Wolf Riot gives to a small gun-based armor ship are incredible. Alrighty, so some more information. We're on slide 60 now. Some more information on wormholes. There's the wormhole article at the Uni Wiki, and then these other 2 links here at alatha.com and pastor.gg have links to all the individual wormhole systems. So if you ever want to see what a wormhole system is about, you can go to those sites, type in your wormhole system name, and you'll get information on statics and the class of the wormhole and all sorts of stuff like that. Okay. So a couple of the sites you can find then are relic and data sites. There's a special type of data site called a sleeper cache. They appear as data sites. Definitely not something you should warp into unless you know what you're doing. If you decide you want to start looking at sleeper sites, get out onto Google, do some research. They have special requirements to complete. They can have rats, corrosive gas fields, invisible minefields. If you don't know what you're doing, you're probably going to get blown up. Otherwise, other than that, relic and data sites have a little mini game that needs to be played in order to gain access to the can. So the can is basically locked. You play the little mini game, and that will unlock the can so you can hack it. Details on the hacking, the game was changed in the Odyssey expansion, are detailed in the link at the bottom of slide 61, but I'll cover them with you here in a little bit of detail. Unfortunately, that's where my slide deck runs out, so we'll just have to do talky for the rest of it. Okay, so when you come across a data or relic site, you'll warp to the site and you'll see anywhere from 5 to 7 cans floating in space, depending upon the security of the space and the type of the site. If you're at a data site, what you need to do is you get to close to a can within 5 or 6K, you lock the can up as a target, and then you click on your data analyzer for a data site and your relic analyzer for a relic site. It will pop up a little mini game. In the lower left of your mini game is the information on your virus. Your virus has both a strength, which is its attack value, and coherence, which is its life or hit points. Your coherence is, there's a little asterisk icon that indicates how many hit points your virus has left. And the strength, if you connect your mobile device to your Wi-Fi somewhere, you'll get that little icon that's like a dot with some circles above it. There's an icon like that in the minigame that represents the strength of your virus. So what you'll do is you'll have a grid appear that's a bunch of little circles separated by lines. And you basically, and that's like nodes within a circuit board. And you start with one node and you have to click your way through the minigame looking for the system core. Every time you click on a node, if there's nothing there, a little number will appear. And that number from 1 to 5, 5 meaning 5 or more jumps, or the other indicating the exact number, is the number of nodes you are away from either a helpful node or what's called, it's a little white dot, I can't remember the name of it right now.
It's called a data cache.
Thank you, data cache. If you click on the data cache, it can be either a helpful node, it can be either a helpful item, or it can be a defensive node. As you click through the grid, if you find a defensive node, to attack the node, you click on it. And then what happens when you click on it is, what happens as you click on a defensive node is if your strength is greater than or equal to the remaining coherence on the node, it's destroyed. Otherwise, you lose hit points equal to the node's strength, and the node loses hit points equal to your strength. So it's basically click through. If you run out of strength on your virus, you fail the hack. If you fail the hack on the same can twice, the can explodes. Doesn't do any damage, unlike in a ghost site, but that can goes poof and you lose whatever's in it. There are 4 types of defensive nodes, and if you successfully complete the hack, you just open the container and loot it. There are 4 types of defensive nodes. There's a firewall that has very high health but very little strength. There's an antivirus subsystem that's the reverse. It has low hit points but high strength. There are restoration nodes that show up in the more difficult hacks. Each turn they are active, they will give extra coherence to one other random uncovered defensive subsystem. So the minute you see a restoration node, you should kill it. And the fourth one is a virus suppressor system that cuts your virus strength in half while it's active. And if you ignore it and find more of them, it'll cut it in half again and again. So the restoration nodes and the suppressor nodes should be whacked as quickly as you can. Okay, there are also 4 helpful items that you can find while you're hacking a site. If you find a helpful one, you click on it, and there's a little tray at the bottom of the minigame that has 3 slots. You can have up to 3 helpful items available at any one time. The first one is a self-repair utility. It looks like a little spanner. When you click on it, it drops down into your tray. There's no reason you shouldn't activate the self-healing utility as soon as you get it. It has 3 charges, and after you activate it, and for the next 2 times you click on a node, you get your health restored by a random number. Whatever the random number is, you get it 3 times. The second one is a kernel rot utility, which will reduce a target subsystem's coherence by 50%. So it's great for use on the system core, or if a restoration node has boosted something up really high, you hit a kernel rot, hit the thing, and it'll 50% off right at the top. The secondary vector utility is the third one. It acts like a repair utility, but in reverse. It's got 3 charges, so you activate it and then click a couple of other nodes, and for those 3 turns, the health of the virus you've attacked will reduce by 20 each time for a total of 60. The final one is called a polymorphic shield utility, and it prevents the next 2 instances of damage done to your virus. So it's good for taking down subsystems with high strength. Okay, the final thing is the target. The target is the system core. It operates a lot like a defensive subsystem, the major difference being that disabling it will successfully complete the hack. The system core typically has a lot of health but very little attack. It looks like an X inside a subsystem circle, and it comes in 3 different strengths. The easy sites are green, and it has a strength of 50. A coherence of 50. The yellowy orange ones are the medium difficulty that have 70, and the reds are the hard ones, and they're 90 health. It's kind of difficult to explain without actually doing it. Great way to practice is to scan down a relic site in high sec where you're in relative safety, and you should very quickly get the hang of it. So a couple of tips about hacking sites. Question is, should you still use the spanner if your health is already high? I don't see any reason why you shouldn't do it straight away. Because the problem is, if you've gone really far through the hack, and then you activate the spanner, but you have no available nodes to click on, the repair only happens as you click on nodes. So if you're down low in strength and your only option after you've clicked on the spanner is to attack a defensive node, you're going to do the damage, then repair, and it may have been enough to kill you. So I always use my spanners as soon as I find them.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so a couple of tips for hacking the can. What I normally do is orbit the container at 2100 meters. 2100 meters is close enough to loot it when the hack's complete, but far enough away from it to cloak up if you find a hostile on grid or on D-scan. So it's a nice, safe option. Refresh your D-scan every node. You know, when you're in wormhole space, you should be refreshing your D-scan every 3 seconds. It's a very common failing for newer players is they ignore D-scan and then they're surprised when a fleet appears on grid and blows them up. And watch your overview. So when I'm hacking a site, it's refresh D-scan, click a node, check overview. Refresh D-scan, click a node, check overview. Sometimes if I've been found a long string of sites, I get lazy, and that's how I got blown up the other night. Anytime I've been blown up, it's because I haven't been checking D-scan every 3 seconds like I should. So after 15 months, you think I would have learned, but I'm apparently hard-headed. All right, so exploration in high sec is relatively safe as you ever are in high sec. Watch local for war targets and, suicide gang fleets. But in any other space, always be cloaked. So we're going to move on. That's it with the theory. Any questions on the theory before we move on to the practical?
There are any hints if I have on the, let's say, a relic site, or I have 5, 4, 3. This is what it's indicating.
Okay, what that's telling you is how many nodes you are away from either a helpful item that you can pick up or a data cache, which is, we didn't go back and talk about the data cache. The data cache appears as a white dot. When you click on the white dot, and that should be the last thing you ever do. If you're really desperate, then explore the data caches, but leave them from last. They can either be a helpful item or they can be a defensive node. In my experience, they seem to be about 2/3 defensive and about 1/3 helpful. Now, that's not to say I haven't been desperate for healing, clicked on one of them and found something helpful. So I usually only reveal them as a last resort. Okay. So if we've got no other questions, everyone should be in their exploration frigate. We're going to undock from wherever we are, and I'll quickly run you through the actual scanning interface. So once you're in space, you want to launch your probes, start moving away from them, and cloak up. Then the other thing you're going to want to do from there is open your probe scanning window, which you launch via Alt-P. Okay, so let's have a look at our probe scanner window. At the top, you've got 6 buttons up the top of your probe scanner window. The first one and the biggest one is Analyze. What happens when you click Analyze is wherever your probes currently are in space, it'll start the 10-second Analyze cycle and return the data back to you. Next to that is an icon that looks like a whole bunch of circles close together on top of each other. The tooltip over the top of it says Launch Pinpoint Formation. That is pretty much the default formation you're going to use. That has all your probes fairly closely grouped together to try and pinpoint down the site you're trying to scan. Next to that is the button that says Launch in Spread Formation. Now, I've really got a feeling, it probably goes back before my time in EVE, that spread formation goes back to the days where the signatures didn't automatically appear. My understanding is back in the day you had to launch probes, scan a whole system with your probes spread out as far as possible, and if there were any signatures, it reported them. That's not the case these days. The signatures automatically appear. So I've never had a use for the spread formation. Well, that's not true. You could also, if you have a particularly large system and you're trying to get a grip on, if you're trying to find a ship or a structure, I guess you could throw out the spread formation just to try and cover the whole system, but I've rarely, if ever, used it. The next one over with the 3 circles, you can actually, if you've manually adjusted the location of your probes, and I'll get to that in a minute, you can save that formation so that the next time you launch them, they appear where you've got them placed. The 5th one, the arrow in the circle, will return your probes to your hold. And the last one, which looks like a solar system map, if you press it now, will bring up the solar system map. So if you've launched your probes, what you should be seeing in space now, and you can zoom in or out with your mouse wheel. Now, by default, I've got 8 blue circles that are fairly greatly spread out. If you go back to those top 2 buttons where you have Launch Pinpoint and Launch Spread and click those, Launch Spread will group the probes back together in a smallish group. Sorry, Pinpoint puts them back in a smallish group, and Spread will spread them out wide. When you're trying to scan down a signature, you want them to be in Pinpoint. So you should be seeing 2 or 3 things. The first thing you're going to be seeing is a cube that has an arrow off each side of the cube and 8 blue circles grouped around it. The other thing you should be seeing is 1 or more red spheres with a small red X in the middle. Those are the signatures that are in the system. And if you have DScan open, you'll also see a big blue sphere around the whole area, indicating the range of your DScan. Now, of course, when you're cloaked, it's not as important to be descanning, but you should still try and keep it up as much as you can. But some people have reported who have varying levels of color blindness that they have a whole deal of trouble trying to locate their scan signatures with their DScan open. So if you have DScan up while you're scanning and you close the window, that blue sphere will disappear. Okay, then there are 2 other windows. Below the world buttons, there are 2 other groups of windows. The first one says probes. At the bottom of that line, you can shrink or you can enlarge or reduce that window to show 1 through 8 probes. I have mine shrunk down so that I only show 1 probe because I don't have any need to see all 8 of them. The pieces of information on this window is the numbers of the probe. The first time you launch them in a session, you'll get 1 through 8. When you recall them and launch them again, they'll be numbered 9 through 16. So the name is really irrelevant. The next is a time. By default, when you launch it, it's 1 hour and 4 minutes. Why they chose 64 minutes, I don't know. What that is the battery life of your probes. Now, in days gone by, my understanding is if you ran out of battery, the probes just vanished. What happens now is if you leave your probes out in space for 65 minutes, when they run out of batteries, they're returned to your hold. The last thing is the scan radius. By default, on launch, they're at 4 AU. You can expand or contract that as needed, and I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. The bottom part of the window is your scan results. Several pieces of information here. You've got the estimated distance from where you are to the center of the signature. There's a scan ID, which is always 3 letters, dash, and 3 numbers. And then you have a group. Once you've scanned down the side, it'll say gas site, data site, whatever. And finally, the scan strength you've got locked on that signature. Okay, so in order to start scanning, there's a few things we need to know. The first is your camera. If you click in space, anywhere in space that's not on one of these red spheres or blue spheres, and then move your mouse around, left, right, up, down, you'll move your camera through 3 dimensions. Okay? The next thing, as I've mentioned, is zoom in, zoom out. So that will zoom your camera in and out. Normally what you want to do is to scan down a signature, pick the signature you want to scan. So you've got a signature, you can either double click in space on one of the red X's, and that will center that signature, or you can double click on the signature in your probe scanner window, and it will center that signature in the center of your screen. From there, what you then want to try and do is, once I've chosen if you click on one of the signatures in the probe scanner window, what it does is it temporarily removes all the other red spheres from space. So you can just concentrate on that one. Then what you want to do is you want to try and move the center of the cube to be over the X. So I sort of turn my camera so I'm looking down one axis of the cube, and I center that as close as I can over the X. Then I change my camera angle 90 degrees to the left or right and recenter it that way. And then if you really want to be sure, you can change it to be looking down the top. And make sure that as close as you can tell, and zoom in as close as you can. The closer you zoomed in, the more accurate your centering is going to be. And make sure that the center of that box is on the center of that red X. Once you've done that, you may find that your blue spheres are smaller than your red spheres. So for your first scan, you want to make sure that you've completely encompassed, because what that red sphere means is your cosmic signature could be anywhere in the 3-dimensional space identified by that sphere. So in order to try and find the most likely place for it, you need to expand the range of your probe so you completely encapsulate the red inside the blue. Now, the way you can do that is if you move your mouse over the clump of blue spheres, you'll see one of them highlight. You can then click on that and drag it out or in to increase or decrease the size of your scans. Now, it's also possible, as of the patch 3 or 4 months ago, maybe even 6 months ago now, inside your settings, if you hit escape and go to general settings and escape and go to shortcuts, and then under combat on the shortcuts, you have options there to decrease probe scan range, increase probe scan range, and there is another one there to scan. So I have a mouse that has buttons on the side, or you can set it to your keyboard and set it up so that, say, 1 might increase your probe scan range, 2 might decrease it, and 3 might actually refresh the probe scan. So you can do it by clicky, or you can create shortcuts in your key bindings to do it for you. So once we've got the signature that we're trying to scan, we've centered our scan probes, and we have our blue completely overlapping our red, you can click Analyze. You'll get a little whirry sound, which is your probe scans, your probes warping. Then there's a little ringing sound as it completes the scan, and while it's completing the scan, there's a blue bar that goes across the Analyze button. Then hopefully when you've completed your scan, you'll have some line underneath your signature with an estimated strength. So then basically all you need to do to scan down the signature is you recenter your probes on wherever. Now, it's possible that the red sphere changes after that to be a dot or a 2D circle with a red X in the middle, or it might even be 2 dots, the one signature getting you 2 dots. If you have 2 dots, what that means is one of them is correct and one is a shadowy echo. So if you happen to get the 2 dots, you can either position your probe scanner halfway between them, making sure the blue spheres cover both of them, do a scan, it should clear down to just one, or you can guess, do the first one, scan, it'll either be 100% or close, or it'll be next to nothing. So if you're doing the shadowy thing, if you pick one, scan it, it'll either be 0 or 100. If it's 0, it's the wrong echo, go to the other one, you find the right one. Well, it depends upon the strength of the scan. You know, it may be that if you've got 2 dots and you're closer to one at 70% strength, I'm probably going to go for the closer one. If I've got 2 dots at 20% strength, I'm going to go for the other one. So you can play games on it. But so in order to scan down, it's basically you center with what you've got, hit scan, you'll get a strength on the reading, and the dot or the center of the signature will move. And then it's just a matter of recentering, decreasing your range, and scan again. And so if you continue doing that, each time you scan, providing your scan strength is high enough, you should be able to scan down the signature. Everyone have a crack at doing it and see if you can scan down a signature. Remember to zoom in as well. When you're recentering, zoom in, because you'd be surprised at when you're zoomed out, you think you're centered, but you're not. So the signature I'm working on, I've got up to 33.6% strength. It's telling me that it's a gas site. And the line under the probe has turned to the orangey yellow one. For my hotkeys, I do 1 to expand the probe radius, 2 to decrease it, and 3 to scan. But that's just me. They happen to map neatly to some extra buttons I've got on this mouse with all the buttons on the side. Okay, so a couple of other tips. When you're with controlling your probes, you can modify when you're clicking on the blue spheres to increase and decrease your radius. You can modify the effect by Control, Alt, and Shift. Control will let you, without changing the radius of the scan of the individual probes, you can move your probes further apart or closer together. Sometimes doing that, if you bring your probes really close together on top of each other, if you've got a scan radius down to like 98 or 99% and you just can't quite get that lock, you can bring them closer together, and that will sometimes work as well. And finally is Shift. Shift will change your cube into 8 cubes, and you can position your probes individually. Again, I think that's really a leftover from pre-Odyssey. I can't think of, apart from when my skills were not where they are now. I'd sometimes play with that, trying to track down the last pinpoint of a particularly difficult signature, but I haven't used that particular function in ages. Okay, so with that covered, unless there's any questions, we are pretty much done.
How can I copy a wormhole from scan result or
Okay, what you want to do?
I want to post it in chat, but without writing it down.
What, the location, the actual location in space, or the name of the wormhole? There's no way to share the location other than making a bookmark of it and trading the bookmark to another character. Is that what you're asking?
I think he's asking about the name itself, putting it into the scan, and if that is the case, all you have to do is drag it down, drag the system name down into the chat box, like so, and it'll work.
From where did you drag this?
If you look on the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the name of it. It'll say the name and whatever it's...
Distance ID name.
No, like, it'll say whatever negative 1.0 up there at the up top left. When you hold your mouse over it, it turns yellow, so click it down, and you're good to go from there.
If you're trying to drag something clickable from the probe scanner window, you can select it and copy and paste it. So, for example,
I can't do it.
That's what I just copied and pasted is from my probe scanner window.
I apologize. He's trying to get the system name. So all you have to do is go up to the system name and drag it. Like click it, hold it, and drag it.
Are you trying to drag the scan ID from the probe scanner window or the name of the system that you're in?
The name, not the name of the system, the name of the wormhole.
Right. So the name of the wormhole you can't drag and drop from the probe scanner window. Like, are you trying to drag in your ABC-123?
Decision from the group that just didn't anticipate that this was going to
yes.
Yeah, the only way you can do that's not drag and droppable anywhere. You can select it in the probe scanner window, copy it with Control-C, and paste the text into the chat like I just did into lecture.E-UNI. But beyond that, you can't.
Okay.
You can right-click Show Info, and then you can drag that info panel, as I did earlier, which just shows wormhole Z971.
Yeah, but the actual scan ID, there's no way to drag that. Yeah. The other thing about, as someone mentioned there, high-sec exploration, there's not a lot of money to be made in high-sec relic sites. Great to practice. You can find decent money in wormholes. You can find, I've had nights where I've pulled a couple of 100 million out of 3 or 4 wormholes. I've had nights where I haven't found a site in 3 or 4 wormholes.
Yeah, sometimes it's a few hours because you're just bouncing around like, oh, that's a sleeper site, that's a sleeper site. Okay, this one's got nothing in it. I can loot this stuff.
The other thing to worry about is if you're a newer player and you go jumping into wormhole space, you will get blown up. I'll guarantee it. Eventually.
I think I've died in high sec more than I have in wormholes. That's just me. I'm like epically paranoid in wormholes, and in high sec I'll attack a cruiser and a destroyer because I'm an idiot.
And just to show, I have very early in my EVE career, I lost 2 Asteros in a month. And, the combined addition of those of a couple of 100 million was quite upsetting because I didn't have a couple 100 million.
Where are you getting these Nexus crystals at, or whatever they are for the Astero?
They drop from drone sites. If you see a combat anomaly called drone something, they rarely drop from them. You're more likely to find them from the rogue combat sites. So Haunted Yard, Chemical Yard, Desolate Site will sometimes drop them. I've spent weeks. Oh, they're a piece of cake.
Stratios run it.
Oh, Stratios will kill them. Before I got my Confessor, I ran them in a Rifter, and then once I got my Confessor, a Tech 3 destroyer will destroy them.
Oh wow.
Okay, got a quick question now. These sites, are they like wormhole? These drone sites, or are those just found in high sec, low sec?
I I've high and low.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because I recently got some money for a confessor. It's a pretty fun ship.
When I was living in high-sec space, I would regularly go out scanning, and if I found a drone site, I always ran it trying to find a chip.
I have a question. Can you find pirate sites in any class wormhole, or is it only like the C1 to C3?
C1 to C3. Well, okay. Short lie. You'll only find the pirate relic and data sites in C1 to C3. You will sometimes find them in a shattered C4. Because in a shattered wormhole, you can be ±1 on what you can find in there.
Ah, that's good to know.
Oh, that's another thing to know. If you're in wormhole space and you're scanning down data and relic sites, if the name of the relic site is unsecured or frontier something, that is it's more a combat site than it is a salvage site. You can fight the sleepers that will be there. You can hack the cans, and you'll get components that are used in Tech 3 production. But if you're just after the loot, stick to, Blood, Garistas, Serpentis, stick to the pirate factions.
Pirate factions, I've never had any rats in them.
Yeah, they don't have rats.
But like the fans, all that other weird stuff, if it's not like Serpentis or something like that, it's always had crap spawned in it. But you can always, it depends on the ship too. Like, I'll Google the NPCs and see if I can kill them, if I'm in there in my Stratios. If I'm in there in my straight no-tank scanny ship, I don't even bother. Because obviously there's no DPS or tank.
Okay, any other questions before I depart? Because my daughter wants to play board games.
How long does it take you to scan down like a system that's got 10 or 15 signatures in it?
I can do 2 to 3 sites. Well, that's not true. If I can do a site a minute, depending upon, how accurate you are, maybe a little bit less, site every 45 seconds. Because, it takes, every time you position your probes, you're looking at 30 seconds, because you've got 3 or 4 seconds for the probes to warp to where they're going, and then 8 to 10 seconds for it to scan, and then you've got to reposition it, and it's 2 to 4 scans per site. I still don't have my skills perfect. I've always found other things to do than improve my skills any.
Yeah,
the last thing I wanted to share that I forgot for anyone who's still listening. If you open your ship fitting window, which is Alt F, and make sure you've got probes loaded in your launcher. Okay, if you hover your mouse over the probes that are loaded in your launcher in the fitting window, you'll get those 5 little circles or 6 circles. 1, 2, 3. There are little icons pointing towards the center of the fitting window. The second one from the thing is show. It's an eye in a circle that says show charge info.
Yes.
Then go to the attributes tab. Then about 2/3 of the way down in the attributes tab is a line that says base sensor strength. Now, if you were just to do a show info on your core scanner probe in your hold, that would say 40 or 44, depending if it was regular or faction. If you do the show info like I've just told you, it shows you your total scan strength with all your modifiers applied. So, for example, mine shows 104.5. If you get that up to 106, 107, you should be able to scan down just about anything. So there you go. So those of you that are showing 76 and what have you, you're probably going to have trouble scanning down some of the harder sites just because you don't have enough scan strength. Or you can scan them down. It'll just take more iterations to do it. The higher your scan strength, the quicker you can get a lock on it. All right. Thanks all. Have a great day.